Good morning. So we continue our journey in reviewing and summarizing the conclusion of Ayin Beis, which the Rebbe Rashab did not finish. However, we have plenty of evidence and material upon which we can build upon to piece together how the Rebbe Rashab would have most likely continued the Hemshech. And that's based both on the Rebbe Rashab's own references, questions, unfinished themes, different indicators, as well, and primarily the source material in the Maimer HaMagbil Sheves, from the Alter Rebbe, the beer of it in Torah, and the long Maimer of the Mittler Rebbe based on that, HaMagbil Sheves. So I wrote a long essay, a 47, 48 page essay to do exactly that, put together all the pieces and try to speculate what the continuing of the Hemshech would have been. So we're reviewing that summary now, that essay. The essay has been posted on Ayin Beis, on the Ayin Beis WhatsApp group. And I will now continue, I believe we're on page 20 of this essay. Let me find it here. And we will continue. Yeah. The essay is divided into 7 chapters. We've already covered 3 of those chapters, or I think we're at the end of chapter 3 to be exact. I'll tell you in a moment. With the first chapter covering what the contemplation of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Echad, which is 3 levels of Yichud. This is the Rebbe Rashab. That's where he finishes Ayin Beis. Yichud Tata, Yichud Elah, and the Yichud of both Yichudim. So the first chapter in the essay covers the continuation of how that impacts the animal soul and turns it into V'haftas Hashem L'kecha b'chol avavcha b'shnei yitzarecha, that also the animal soul loving God, with the analogy of the Ner Hashem Nishma Sodom, a Ner, the wick, the divine soul, transforming the oil, the intelligence of the animal soul into fuel for the fiery passion of Avos Hashem. The second chapter covers Ner Mitzvah, what the mitzvah adds to it. A mitzvah is also called a Ner. The makif of the mitzvah, how it elevates and has a special zgula, a special feature, special quality to help elevate the animal soul and the world around us, the physical world. And the third chapter, which, like I said, where we are right now, let me just make sure. Actually, we're already in the 4th chapter. I'm sorry. The 3rd chapter talks about Torah Ner Mitzvah, Torah the Atzmi, where it elevates it to a far higher level of and Gilui, and the comparison between mitzvahs and Torah. And the 4th chapter is putting it all together, how all 3, Ner Hashem Nishma Sodom, with the mitzvah, with the Torah, how each one contributes to the next. And that's what we're in the middle of right now. So we are on page 20, I believe. Let me just make sure. Yeah, bottom of page 20. So what we've learned so far is that it is, even though Torah is higher in Gilui than Ner Mitzvah and Ner Hashem Nishma Sodom, but to get there, you need to begin step by step. And the first step is the contemplation of the soul in Tefillah, especially in Shema, in Hashem Echad. That in turn brings us to the level of Ner Mitzvah, and ultimately to Torah transforming the seichel of the Nefesh Habamis to become like seichel of Torah Chakim v'lei b'chachmi yediyah, as the Alter Rebbe explains. So the psila of the Nefesh Alakis is like a kav. It's a limited, like a psila, like a wick. The of Torah is like the before the tzimtzum. It's not like a kav. It's blikvul. And how do we reach that blikvul is by transforming the animal soul. Because the animal soul comes from the world of Tayu, the intense energies of Tayu. So when you transform the animal soul, to loving God, it's with an extra intensity and passion that increases even much more than the divine soul on its own. Like the wick burns that much, but with the oil of the animal soul, of the seichel of the animal soul, of the nefesh habamis, then the flame burns longer and more intense and consistently and smoothly and so on, as we learned. So the combination of all these things together is what creates the ultimate achdus, talking about interface between the divine and existence, and we need them all. The neshama is, of course, the central player of everything, but you need the mitzvahs and you need the Torah, and we'll talk more about how each one contributes as we go along. But that's what we've learned here till the bottom. I said the bottom of page 20. So now I'm going to continue the last paragraph of page 20 of this essay. Again, if you want to follow the text, you can go to this essay is a PDF document that was posted on ayinbeis.com, and we will continue reading. And even if you don't have the text, I'll be reading it and explaining it all, so you don't need the text to follow along. Put it that way. Okay. Nimtza, the last paragraph on page 20 of the essay. Let me make sure that I covered. Okay, that's Bli Gvul, Eir. That's why it's called Eir. Okay. Nimtza. So what do we derive from all of this? What do we take away? One minute, I lost my place here. Nimsa Shabavedis Kol Yem, that the service, our service of God, Avedis Hashem every day, Maschilim im Avedis Tefillah. So right in the morning, the first thing we do is Tefillas HaShachris, the morning prayer. We begin the Aveda with Tefillah. Ubefrat Krishma, and especially Krishma, which is like the central prayer in Tefillah itself, with a focus on Hashem Echad. And all the prayers before that, we learned how that prepares us, how it warms up, softens the nefesh habamis. Shel haner Hashem hapsila da neshama mitzad atzma momata l'maylo. So it begins with the neshama, because obviously who's praying? Prayer doesn't pray on its own. Is the neshama beguf, the nefesh halikis, which is the wick, in the analogy of the Ner Hashem, that is davening and saying Shema, the neshama on its own, momata l'mayla, from the bottom up. So even though God gives it strength, but the primary initiative is being generated by the Aveda momata l'mayla, levarer hanefesh habamis, to refine the animal soul Hashemen, the oil, v'lahavchai la'avahavtes Hashem elkecha, and to transform it. Instead of loving itself and loving its own existential needs, which the animal soul does on its own, here it's being transformed to v'ahavtes Hashem elekecha. You shall love God b'chol levavcha, with all your heart, not just with the right side of the heart, but also the left side of the heart. B'shnei yitzarecha, with both sides. Nefesh halikis, nefesh habamis, yetzer teiv and yetzer hara. Ad, till, and in this ava itself, there are levels. B'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol meidecha. Ad lebchinas ava bli gvul de b'chol meidecha. And in this Aveda, the goal is not just to remain b'chol levavcha, and even b'chol nafshecha, which he said is still limited, but b'chol meidecha, Aveda of ava bli gvul. And being that the nefesh habamis is rooted in the intense energies of Teyu, once it's harnessed and directed, so then it's channeled toward increasing the fire and the passion far more than the nefesh halikis on its own, as we learned earlier. That is the first step. Like I laid it out earlier, the 3 steps. B'neisef lezeh. In addition to that, we have siyua, we have strength. Haner Mitzvah, levishes tfalas utfilin kedem atfila. The Ner Mitzvah, which is the mitzvah and specifically he mentioned the wrapping of talis and tefillin before davening, that increases. Mamshich b'chinas makiv shel mitzvah. That draws down another level that the neshama on its own does not access, that the mitzvah adds, which is the makif of mitzvahs, the levush, if you recall, lahesiv koyach miyuchad, which adds a special power, a special strength. Like he said, asgula miyuched is a special quality and feature that and power that the mitzvah has. Lahalis is nefesh habam is betfilah, to help elevate the animal soul during davening. This was discussed earlier more at length. If you need more information on this, just go back a few pages earlier in the essay where it's discussed at length how the Ner Mitzvah adds to this Aveda. And now comes the third stage. And then from here we come to the Hamshach of Teira Eir, the full-blown Eir, not just Ner Mitzvah, like a candle, but the Eir which now is Hamshach Mamayla Lamata. Hamshach is Eir Atzmi Shalifnei Atzimtzum, which, as we learned earlier, is the Hamshach of Eir Atzmi that's pre-Tzimtzum, not affected by the Tzimtzum. The Ner Mitzvah is affected by the Tzimtzum because the Mitzvah is mislabish in Dvarim Gashmim. Teira Eir is a direct line, as I said, straight like from the source code, straight from the manufacturer's plant before the Tzimtzum, and is not affected by the Tzimtzum. Ad shetiyeh, and here's quote, just quoting part of the mimer from before, Ad shetiyeh chochmah shebenefesh achiyunis, to the extent that the wisdom of the animal soul, b'chinas hashemen hanimshach achar hapsila, will be, which is the level of oil that now is being drawn and absorbed into the wick, shel mitzvah. This skal mamish be'er hatera, next page 21, that is being drawn into the psila. The psila also refers to the mitzvahs because all the mitzvahs manifest in gashmistic things. To be drawn, the skal be encompassed and engulfed or submerged or encompassed, be'er hatera, in the light of Teira, tishapech mamish bahafuch al hafuch, that it should be transformed, the animal soul, the intelligence of the animal soul from one extreme to the next, miseichel anushi, from human intelligence, the hamusag, meaning from a discernible or an understandable human intelligence, leseichel chochmas haTeira, chochma lekiz b'chinas chakim v'lei b'chochmi yediyah. So human intelligence now of the animal soul is being transformed as it becomes fuel that's being absorbed in the wick to turn into what? Into the Eir of Teira. And Eir of Teira is more than just human wisdom. It has the element of a wisdom that's beyond wisdom, a wisdom of a reality and consciousness that's higher than human consciousness. So human consciousness is now becoming divine consciousness. That's the ultimate transformation. End quote. This is straight language from Teira Eir, from the Alter Rebbe's Maimer. This sums up the last section that we've just learned, which is the beginning of chapter 4 of this essay. And as I said, we're on top of page 21. Okay. So there we have a summary of the Alter Rebbe's. Now we're going to go into what the Mittler Rebbe adds to all of this. Mittler Rebbe comes to add and discuss a few aspects, some contradictions, and provide more clarity in this picture, which we'll do in a moment. But I'll stop here if anybody has any questions. Okay.
So what does it mean that the Torah is the same thing? There's no shino in it, and it brings it like before the symptom. What does it mean, Lemaisa? It's coming to us. It's in our level.
We have 5 pages of the Alter Rebbe and Mittler Rebbe explained that we actually learned this in detail, what it means. What's your question exactly? Torah is a gift from Hashem. Do you understand what the Gemara means? That when the Eibishter gave Matan Torah, he gave the Chem de Gnuza, his hidden treasure, to the human race, down below. Why is Teda called Chemda Gnuza? Because it's not regular wisdom. It's not the wisdom of creation. It's Teda. It's Hashem's Teda. It's a reflection on non nafshi ksavis yahavis. God himself has infused, has embedded himself, inscribed himself within the Teda. Eisi atam lechin. This is a Teda that reflects the highest levels of Elikus and is given to us even after the Tzimtzum, even after creation, in the world of creation, the whole Chiddush of Matan Teda, that a Teda that's higher than the whole Seder Shtalshelus comes down below, Dafkin Tachtenim, and the Mevatel the Gzeira Bein Al Yenim the Tachtenim, everything you've ever learned about Teda. So maybe I'm not getting clear. What are you asking exactly?
So that
Why
means
is
we are getting the pnimius of the Torah. Mitzvahs, we are not getting it.
Teda is
Mitzvahs
the
is all.
reflection of God's. Teda is God's wisdom and God's plan. Everything in the Teda is telling you God's inner plan of what He wants us to do with this world. Without
And a
Teda, we have a
mitzvah.
world. What? I'm not sure what you're asking. Teda.
No, my,
Without Teda, we have no direction and guidance how to fulfill God's plan for our lives.
I understand. And a mitzvah, why is a mitzvah, we cannot get it in such a way? It has
A
to
mitzvah is
be
not
only.
Teda. A mitzvah is just an action. A mitzvah is an order. If you just do a mitzvah without Teda, you have no gilu. You just are fulfilling like an eved. A servant a mitzvah is the implementation of Teda. Teda is the whole wisdom, the whole limud Teda is what you're learning, the reasons behind it, the time Teda, understanding God's mind. You can do mitzvahs and not have any clue of what God is thinking. You're just following His orders. He tells you to put on film, keep Shabbos, kashrus. So we learned at length that mitzvahs are implementation of God's wisdom, which is critical because that's the goal. The goal is to implement. But Teda provides the whole gili. I don't know how many examples for this. I would just suggest going back to the previous classes and read them, listen to them again, because this we discussed very directly over weeks upon weeks. I mean, if someone wants to weigh in and add,
Thank
by
you.
all means. But I literally discussed it for hours. I'm not exaggerating. Which is no problem to go
Yes.
over it again and again. I'm just summing it up now. But the material is there. We learned it inside and elaborated on it.
Could
Do you
we
remember,
say
were you
that
here
the
the classes
Sinai,
were you
the
here during the
Chokhmah?
classes when we talked about Teda Shebiksav and Teda Shebal Peh?
Yes. Yes.
So that was all part of how Teda comes down below. Mitzvahs is the implementation. Mitzvahs is like it means these are the commandments. And then there's Teda. But like he said, Ikram v'yisedasis shel Teda is nechaz ba'mitzvahs. That was the lashon that the Alter Rebbe uses. So obviously they're all intertwined.
It goes together. Is correct
And
to
then we
say that
spoke about the Tanya Perek Chav Gimel, the difference between the yichud of mitzvahs, Eivarin de Malka, and the yichud of Teda ad Aisav Kudshabrichu Kul Achad. Remember that?
yeah. Is it correct to say that Ritzonoi is higher than Chochmosoi? The mitzvahs, before it comes to us.
In a certain way, yes. But there's some things that Chachma has that Rotzen doesn't have. Chachma has more gili than Rotzen. Rotzen has more etzem, as we discussed as well. Rotzen Hashem, is the mitzvahs, keser. So yesh bezem Hashem bezeh. It's like saying Talmud and Maisa. There's things that Talmud has, there are things that Maisa has. Talmud Gadol, Shemei v'lidei Maisa. You need both. That's the bottom line. You must have both. There's no such thing as one without the other. Ultimately. Okay?
Thank you.
Sure. But again, listen, I've learned these ideas many times. If you really want to integrate it, internalize it, the more you review it, the better you'll be. Because these are complex topics and there's a lot of details, a lot of nuances. So going over it again and again can only help. Any other questions? And just to qualify, when I say we learned it again, that's not, it may come across I'm being impatient and like expecting that you should remember everything we learned. I'm not doing that. I'm just emphasizing that we have learned it and it's good to go back to review it. It wasn't a critique, not a judgment, because I do understand that sometimes you have to hear this and learn it again and again and again till you really fully get it. And even then, it could always help review. So I just want to make sure that my message here is not one of impatience or judgment. Not at all, God forbid. It's just passionately describing what we're doing here and trying to capture it all. Also, the fact that I wrote it down in this essay helps as well because you can read it. Actually, read it in writing where it sums up all these ideas.
There is a special mitzvah for that. Hishomer lecho pen tishkach. It's a mitzvah. Watch
Yeah.
yourself, you should not forget.
Okay,
And
but you know what? We're human beings and we have to learn it again and again to make sure we retain it. I would also add, remember that this is a key, this is not a side thing, this is a key theme of Ayin Beis, because on page 1350 in volume 3, that's where he begins after 550 pages of discussing Avedis HaNeshama Momata L'mayla through Tefillah primarily. Avarimimcha Lekai HaMelech, lifting up, elevating. Lekai HaMelech Alekus B'techa Elamis, to Alekus of Arimimcha Kesed, higher than Elamis. Now he says, Va'ata, we now come to understand on page 1350, the Hamshachim L'mayla L'mata through Teira Er. So what we're discussing now about the difference between Teira Er, L'mayla L'mata, and Tefillah L'mata L'mayla, and Neshama Mitzarasma and Tefillah L'mata L'mayla, is the central theme of a big part of Ayin Beis, maybe the whole Ayin Beis in a certain way. Because it's all about the interface, the two ways. Do you do it from the bottom up? Meaning starting with the Nefesh Elikis, impacting the Nefesh Habamis. And then there's the second half where we do it from the top down. Teira comes, Hamshachim L'mayla L'mata. In Ayin Beis, the order is Mamata L'mayla first and then L'mayla L'mata. And here too, that's the order. So this is very central to Ayin Beis. This is directly like the heart and soul of a big, of a foundational part of Ayin Beis. Okay. With that said, let us now continue. So I'm now in the third paragraph on page 21. So I'll just give a little introduction what this paragraph addresses. So here there's you may have picked this up, but there's a question that is lingering here. We keep saying that we start with Aveda Mamata L'mayla of the Neshama Mitzad Atzma through davening, impacting the animal soul and elevating it. And then comes Ner Mitzvah. But then we also said that the mitzvah begins before davening. Talis and Tefillin is the main mitzvah that the Alter Rebbe is addressing here. And Talis and Tefillin you put on Koydem HaTefillah. So which one is it? Does it begin with Neshama and Tefillah, or does it begin with the mitzvah, Ner Mitzvah? And that's what he's going to address right now in this, that what I'm going to address right now in this paragraph here. How do you deal with that? It's not a contradiction fundamentally, because at the end of the day, the Talis and Film is to help the davening. So it's clearly you're davening in the morning. But which one comes first? So I'm going to read this third paragraph. It says, "Ubenegela astir lechera." And regarding the seeming contradiction, shebetchilas ha'inyan mavayer, in the beginning he first explained Shascholas Aveda, that the beginning of the Aveda, he Aveda Satfil and Aveda Saneshama, is the work of the soul, Ner Hashem, Atzma. And he said clearly in Tere'er, it's the Ner Hashem Atzma on its own, without the help of any other support, meaning any other tools, so to speak, divine tools. And then afterwards, the Alter Rebbe goes on and continues and says, then you elevate to the level of Ner Mitzvah and Teira Er. The ilu behemshach habir, But when we continue the explanation, suddenly he says, maybe, shemaschilim im levishas talis and tefillin kedem atfilah. That we actually begin with a mitzvah of wrapping talis and tefillin before davening. And that's what gives power to the neshama during davening. So which one is it? First, it seems like is the neshama mitzvah atzma, but then we say that we put on talis and tefillin, that's giving us koyach. So to explain this, here's what I write. Harinira, it appears that Shat Tzemach Tzedek, and I'm introducing the Tzemach Tzedek into this. Till now, we've been talking the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe. Shat Tzemach Tzedek, kvar hirgish bezeh, that the Tzemach Tzedek already sensed this so-called seeming contradiction, where Bahagos, in his gloss, in his commentary, Al Dibra Maskal Hamagbi B'Tere'er. So the Tzemach Tzedek also weighs in. He has commentary on the Maimer of the Alter Rebbe. The Mittler Rebbe has this long Maimer that we've been learning, Hamagbi L'Shavas. The Tzemach Tzedek also has his commentary. But the Shemesh Shalei Ala Tilim. Remember the Posuk, the Posuk, Hamagbi L'Shavas, is in Tehillim. And in the Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek's Rishimis in Tehillim called Yal Eir, it's a sefer called Yal Eir, Seif Amid Tuf Mem, the bottom of page 440, he has notes on the Torah Eir, and we're going to quote now what the Tzemach Tzedek says. And what I'm pointing out is that Tzemach Tzedek apparently is addressing this seemingly contradiction. Which one comes first? Is it the neshama and then comes the Ner Mitzvah, or is it the Ner Mitzvah of the talis and film that gives koyach to the neshama? Umevayir beze fanim bezeh. And the Tzemach Tzedek explains there in his gloss, in his commentary, two different ways to explain this. How it works, neshama with mitzvah, how they support each other, so to speak, how they help each other. Just 1 second, I want to just think of something. Talk about Torah Eir and Ner Mitzvah. Yeah. We'll move on to Shnei Emes. And these two approaches, these two efanim that Tzemach Tzedek now will explain, it's understandable, they're both correct. It's not a contradiction, it's just two different approaches. V'zel Shene. So now we're going to be reading actual language of the Tzemach Tzedek in his commentary on the Maimer HaMagbi, printed in his notes on Tehillim. In a sefer called Yaler, this is the Tehillim the Rebbe would use when he said Tehillim. He would always bring this sefer, and often we could see when he was saying Tehillim, he often would look in this commentary. It's a famous commentary, it's very dense, but it's very fundamental, and it's something quoted quite often by the Rebbe, Siddur in general. V'zel Shene. This is the actual language of the Tzemach Tzedek. So he takes, Tzemach Tzedek actually quotes a line from the Maimer of the Alter Rebbe, and then adds his commentary, like a Rashi almost. Says, so the Alter Rebbe's lashon is leifshin talis and film kedem atfilah chulu. That's a language from Torah, the Alter Rebbe's Maimer, that you put on, you wrap talis and film before davening, and that gives koyach to help elevate the animal soul during tefillah. Says the Tzemach Tzedek, and this is going to be a little dense, meaning he just says very few words. It's almost Ragat Shover style, if you're familiar with Ragat Shover. So he says, Ayin Seif Dibra Maskal Vayakal Mesha. He tells us to look in a Maimer from the Alter Rebbe, the end of a Maimer called Vayakal Mesha, Be'inyan Kol HaKeira Krishma B'leit Film. So the Chazal say someone who says Shema without tefillin is as if they're bearing false witness. He doesn't quote the second half, but that's what it says there. So he says, look in the Maimer that talks about this. Which means that in order for Shema to be complete, you need to have the mitzvah first. So that affirms and that supports what the Alter Rebbe says, that before Shema, you put on talis and film. Ubamochim achen is boyer. And Tzemach Tzedek continues. Elsewhere it explains, Kamei hakorban dafke bebeis hamikdash memakiv dema, that like a korban, like an offering that was brought in the Beis Hamikdash, which comes from the makif of Shem Ma, the name of Bittul Ma. The behema, the korban itself is ban. Behema gematria ban. But the korban dafka Beis Hamikdash comes from the makif of Ma. Oze yuchel ha'al is behema begematria ban. In other words, you can't just bring a korban anywhere. You have to bring a dafka in the Beis Hamikdash, because the Beis Hamikdash is a conducive environment of bittul, where then you can go ahead and elevate the behema in the korban. So the Tzemach Tzedek is equating that with the idea why we need Shema, why we need talis and film before Shema, because Shema is elevating the animal soul, and before you elevate the animal soul, you want to have the power of talis and film, the makif of the mitzvah. Similar to the Beis Hamikdash giving power to elevate Shem Ban. So it's a Shem Ma that comes before the Shem Ban, is essentially the idea of talis and film before Shema. Ayin bedibra maskal odem ki yakriv mekem. And he tells us now to also look in the Maimer, which is most likely in Likutei Torah Vayikra, where it talks about odem ki yakriv mekem, and a person that will bring a korban. So there he also talks about the elevation of the animal soul. Okay. Now comes the Tzemach Tzedek and says that's one way to understand it. L'cheira hayanida be'efen acher. L'cheira, seemingly, it appears that you can actually say and explain it a different way, the opposite way, as we'll see here. Al derech masher kosa b'Likutei Torah, similar to what it says in a different place in Likutei Torah, Sev Dibra Amasul Kiseitse Drush Harishin, the end of the Maimer Kiseitse, the first discourse. There are two discourses Kiseitse there. He cites everything with sources. This is classic Tzemach Tzedek style. It's very different. The Mittler Rebbe very rarely cites a source. The Tzemach Tzedek is always citing sources. So he says, what does it say there? Bepirish v'nosnu avaya lekecha biyadecha. So in Parsha Kiseitse, it says Kiseitse lemelchama alevecha. Then when you'll go out and wage war upon your enemies, v'nosnu Hashem lekecha evecha, nosnu Hashem biyadecha. God will give you victory over them. You'll win them over. So Hashem is giving you koyach to fight the war and be victorious. Ayin Sham Perek Dalet, look there in the 4th chapter of the Maimer in Kiseitse, and what does he say? Shu koyach iridus eish shalamayla, acher halos eish shalamata. That after when a person brings a korban, so what do? They put the korban on the altar, a fire is lit, they put the korban on the altar, and the fire consumes the animal, and the eish rises. But then we say, then that causes that it should be mamshich and eish malmayla. Like he says, you read the eish malmayla that comes after the halos eish shalamata. So think of the halos eish shalamata like an asusa deltate. You make the initiative from below, you light a fire below, and that in turn brings a fire from above that will consume. We know that eish rose from that came down from above, that followed the eish that came from below. So what do you see here? The opposite direction, as we're going to see in a moment. Before you were saying that before the korban you have the Beis Hamikdash, before the Shema you have the talis and film that helps elevate and helps give you the power to elevate the animal soul. Now we're speaking about after you elevate the animal soul from the bottom up, then comes something mamayla lamata, from the top down. So he says like this now. Ayin bedibra masles karbone lachmi leishay harishin. He tells us now another mimer. This, I think, is in Parsha Emer. The Pirish Lachmi Leishay. The Lachmi Leishay, that becomes, that Lachmi, my bread becomes Leishay, like a fire, So he says, Kachu Inyan, Ner Mitzvah, Acher Ha'aliyah, the Ner Avaya Nishma Sodom. So now we have the concept of the mitzvah that comes after the Aliyah of Ner Hashem Nishma Sodom, At Kan L'Shenei. That's the language of the Tzemach Tzedek. So you see here two ways. There's what the mitzvah does before the davening, the talis and film, that helps elevate. But then there's what the mitzvah does afterwards. After you do your work from the bottom up, then comes the makif of the mitzvah, and it's mamshich, even a higher level of elikus. So he reconciles both approaches, that they're both elements. There's mitzvah before tefillah, and the mitzvah after tefillah. That's what the Tzemach Tzedek says. So that's why I wrote that apparently the Tzemach Tzedek is coming to address the apparent contradiction. Which one is it? And the answer is both. It's two things. There's a mitzvah before tefillah, and there's a mitzvah after tefillah. We didn't get to Teireh. Teireh is another discussion which will come later. But this is what the Tzemach Tzedek says. Ad kan l'shenei. He's going to say some more about this, but let me stop if anybody wants me to clarify anything. If you have any questions.
Is he saying the same mitzvah, the talis and tefillin, has an
Not
effect?
necessarily.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't say which.
Yeah, it doesn't. So he's saying maybe
It could be both. It could be remember, you still have talis and tefillin on even after Shema.
Right.
And then there's other mitzvahs we do. The mitzvahs we do throughout the day. Remember, most of the mitzvahs we do is not in the morning.
Right, of course.
It's through the day, like tzedakah or other mitzvahs that we're going to do, eating the meal and making brachas. So he's not going into the detail which. He's just saying there is the amshach of mitzvahs before davening, amshach of mitzvahs after davening.
Got it. Yeah, that's why I asked. Yeah.
Yeah.
How would you envision in this scenario? What is the Beis Hamikdash here? We know what we do when we do a mitzvah.
Beis HaMitzvah would be like going into a shul.
Okay. So, but if you daven at home, then that's your shul. Is that?
I mean, you could also daven without talis and tefillin. It's not.
But I mean,
are you doing? Lacking. It's obviously more complete when you daven in a base. When you a korban, you must bring in a Beis Hamikdash. You can't bring a korban outside of the Beis Hamikdash. But tefillah, you could technically daven at home. You can daven. You don't have to be in a shul necessarily. But a shul does have an element there. He's not getting into davening in a shul here. He's just talking about really talis and film.
No, I know.
I already explained. For women, talis and film, they already have naturally. They don't need to actually put it on. So they also have the concept.
Mm-hmm. I was just trying to envision what the corollary would be because we don't have the Beis Hamikdash today. That's all.
So we have a shul.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
But basically, he's saying that the Avodas and Neshama is the first thing. Then it comes the Ner Mitzvah, and this is making the Avodas and Neshama even stronger.
That's not what he's saying. He's saying first is the mitzvah, the talis and tefillin, and that gives koyach to the davening, and then there's the mitzvah after the davening that elevates it even higher.
But the question was that the Neshama, even before the talis and tefillin, is
that's not correct. We put on talis and tefillin before we say Shema.
But in the beginning of this paragraph that you started, l'stiro, what was the stiro? Piras avoido, avodas haneshama.
So the answer is there's both. No. So the answer is there's talis and tefillin before Shema, and there's mitzvah after Shema.
No, I think that both of them are the full Shema.
That correct.
Was the stira. That was the stira, no?
No.
I think you should read it. No. The stira is which one is it? Is the mitzvah come before Shema or the mitzvah come after Shema?
No, the stira was the mitzvah coming before avodas haneshama, or avodas haneshama is coming before the mitzvah.
No, was the mitzvah comes before davening, or was the davening comes before the mitzvah? The neshama is doing everything. The neshama puts on tefillin, and the neshama is the one that davens. So the question is the avodas haneshama mitzad atzma with tefillah before the ner mitzvah, or is it after the ner mitzvah? Okay? Good. Ubahemshech Ayin Beis Sham. Now the Tzemach Tzedek continues. On the next page there, page 441 in the Rishimis on Tehillim, he continues and adds this. V'hinei. And now, Lefi Masha Kosav da mitzvah hi asusa de le'ela. Hama'er asusa l'tata. This is the first ofen. That the mitzvah, which like in this case is putting on talis and film, is the asusa de le'ela that comes before the asusa de l'tata. Shal aliyas ha-nefesh abamis. Shal nefesh abamis. Liyes ner havaya nishmas adam. So first you put on the talis the mitzvah. The mitzvah in turn gives strength to elevate the animal soul to the point that the neshama, in other words, the Ner Mitzvah is giving power for Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam. It's like igniting the flame of the neshama. Pira Sharishan de Le'il, that I add in the brackets. That's the first explanation he gave earlier. Im Kain Yesh Lemer says, based on that, we can say that Pirish v'Teira Eir. What is Teira Eir then? He hamshacha shel acher halah at kan l'shene. That Teira Eir would then be the hamshacha that comes after the halah. So in other words, the mitzvah gives power for the, like in a sense, ignites this, helps ignite the soul, so it can affect the animal soul in Shema. Like he said, akeda tefillin, akeda Shema b'lei tefillin. You need to have the tefillin before the Shema. Then Teira Eir would then be Ner Mitzvah, then Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, and that leads to another to Hamshacha that comes Mamayla Mata from Teira Eir after the Shema. That's what he's saying here. Now, this is not a contradiction to the second interpretation, because the second interpretation is that after Shema comes Ner Mitzvah, and then we go to a higher level, and then Teira Eir would come after Ner Mitzvah. He's not getting into that, but he just wants to add that according to the first interpretation, the order would be Ner Mitzvah, Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, Shema, and then Teira Eir, Hamshacha that comes Acher Halah. So it'd be Hamshacha before Halah, and then Hamshacha Acher Halah. So in other words, Asusa Leila is like gives us the strength. It ignites us. Then we are ignited Mamata Lamaila, the Halah, the carbon that we bring of the animal soul. And then comes another Hamshacha afterwards, like the Eish Shalamayla that he said. Now he's referring to but he doesn't say Eish Shalamayla here. The Teira that Asus Leila that comes after the Asus L'tata. That's what he adds here. Hainu. This means Shaner Mitzvah. Levish's talis and film, that the candle of the mitzvah, which is the wrapping of the talis and film, who am shochem amaylo, ha'ma'er halos ha'nefesh abamis mamata l'maylo. That's the hamshacha from above. When we put on talis and film, the hamshacha of the makif, that in turn awakens and stimulates the elevation of the animal soul mamata l'maylo. Va'acher kach magim la'hamshacha nailis yesher shal the Teira Eir. And afterwards, we reach even a higher level of Teira Eir Shalamayla Mebchinas Ner. That's higher than just a candle. Ner Mitzvah is still a candle. Ner Hashem is also a candle. And now we reach the level of Teira Eir, like we said earlier, Er Atzmi, Lifnei Tzimtzum, etc. Doesn't use that expression here, the Tzemach Tzedek, but you can bring it all together and make sense. And it comes all together in that way. And I'll stop here under the paragraph. And from here on, we're going to go back to the Mittler Rebbe, how the Mittler Rebbe explains it all more elaborately. This piece in the Tzemach Tzedek helps understand a little more the dynamics of the order of mitzvah, of Shema, of Torah, etc. Any questions?
So just so I can cop it, the last part he's saying, you put on talis and tefillin before tefillah, and it's kind of like it's an isusa de la'ela that lifts the nefesh Bahamas to and inspires.
That lifts the neshama, that helps ignite the soul, so it should have the power to elevate the animal soul.
Okay, thank you.
It's like someone giving you, stretching out your hand, like an educator. That gets you going, so to speak. They like launch you. Now you start your work. And then there's the response afterwards that comes from
Which is
even a higher place.
to perform more mitzvahs.
Not
Once
necessarily.
in a,
The Torah that comes after the
Uh-huh.
Aved of the Neshama.
oh, I thought he was saying, how can you have mitzvahs on both sides? And
He's not
first
talking about
you,
mitzvahs on both sides now. Now he's talking about, he says, according to the first interpretation, that the mitzvah gives koyach to the tefillah and the elevation of the animal. So then Torah would be the
I see.
hamshach of Torah, a much higher level of elikuz that comes afterwards.
So it's like two boosts upward. First the mitzvah.
Well, one boost from that initiates, that gets you going. Then
Right.
you're ignited. And then comes Asus Leila afterwards that gets you even to higher levels. Yes. This is a classic theme in Chassidus. Asus Leila that comes before Asus Tata, and then the Asus Leila that comes after the Asus Tata. It's like God's response after you've done your work, but He's also giving you strength before you start your work so you can do it properly.
It seems to me that the beginning in the morning is starting the Avodas HaNeshama. Because without Avodas HaNeshama, why should you want to do mitzvahs? Then you do the mitzvah. Then the mitzvah makes the Avodas HaNeshama even stronger.
The thing is that we're learning here the Alter Rebbe's Maimon, the Mittler Rebbe's Maimon, Tzemach Tzedek. They don't say what you're saying right now.
What you
They're
said
saying
in the
before
beginning.
you do the Avodas. What do you mean by Avodas HaNeshama? You're talking about Moed Ani? No, we don't put on talis and film before Moed Ani. But he's not talking about Moed Ani. He's talking about the primary prayer called Shema. Shema is the primary Yesodistic prayer of Hashem Echad, Yichud. And before we do that, we put on talis and film. He brings the Maimar Chazal, Al-Kaireh Krishma. The late film means you need film before the Avodas HaNeshama of Tfilas Krishma. We're not talking about the Avodas HaNeshama in Bichas, in Meidani, or other types. We're talking here specifically the Avodas HaNeshama in elevating the animal soul in Shema and V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha b'shnei yitzarecha. That's what he's discussing here.
But I'm talking about the Avodas HaNeshama.
But you're
like
talking,
you said
but the Alter Rebbe
before
and the
Shema.
Mittler Rebbe, but they're not talking about it.
But look, Reb Simon, look what it said. You wrote it in the beginning.
Anyway.
בתחילת העניין מבאר שהתחולת העבודה היא עבודת הנשמה עצמו.
But what no, the Avodas HaNeshama atzma
לעבודו.
bekrishma. Avodas HaNeshama atzma bekrishma be'inyan hayichud lahales es nefesh habamis to v'ahavtas Hashem lekecha b'chol levavcha b'shnei yitzarecha. That's what he's referring to Avodas HaNeshama. Okay, let's stop here. Top of page 21. I'm going to stop here the recording.